Jessica, you're muted.
Okay, well, that was a great start. So you guys can all hear me. Today, we're talking about Ethereum Client Diversity. So we're going to get into what is client diversity, why does it matter, and we've got some experts with us today. So I'm Jessica Levesque. I'm the Executive Director. Okay, I'm the Executive Director at C4. And sorry, I'm like hearing myself multiple times. I did not do this very well. Okay, now we're live and should be good to go. Client diversity matters. Why? What is it? We've got James He with us, and we've got Hart Montgomery as well. And so let's do some intros and then we'll get into our committee members. So James, do you want to start and explain who you are, what you do?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm James He, an Ethereum Core Developer working on the Prysm consensus client. We'll talk a little bit about what is a consensus client in Ethereum, but I'm part of OffChain Labs, the initial builders of Arbitrum, one of the most popular Ethereum Layer 2 solutions.
Awesome. And I love that you're wearing your ETH Chicago shirt. It's awesome. Okay, Hart, would you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So hi, everybody. I'm Hart. I work for the Linux Foundation as the CTO of the Hyperledger Foundation. And for those of you that aren't aware, the Hyperledger Foundation is the Linux Foundation's blockchain umbrella. So it's where all the open source projects in the Linux Foundation that are related to blockchain live. Prior to that, I worked in many years for blockchain and cryptography research, and so my background is in academic cryptography.
Wow, so you guys are pretty smart. We're lucky to have you here with us today. So thank you for taking your time to and joining us. So we also have two of our certified Ethereum professional committee members here with us today. So our committee chair is Shayan Eskandari. Shayan, you want to say hello?
Hey everyone, I'm Shayan. As Jessica said, I'm the committee chair at CEP. This week I'm going to be in Prague, so if anyone's in the ETH Prague, Web3 privacy, there's whole blockchain week going on here. Recently I realized it's a Bitcoin Prague week, Cosmos Prague week, like all others. So if you see me there, say hi, come say hi.
Oh wow, that's the place to be. I'm jealous. That sounds fun. Dustin?
Hi, Dustin here, and I'm also with the CEP group, also doing things with Ethereum education. I'm based out of Singapore, and I also run ETH65, which is the Ethereum meetup group that does like meetups, and we recently did one last week on staking, in fact.
Okay, cool. So we have a bunch of experts on this call that know so much about Ethereum. We're very lucky. Thank you for joining us. Let's talk about Ethereum and Ethereum clients and Ethereum client diversity. So I'm assuming if you're watching this, you already know what Ethereum is. So we're not going to start there, but we should do a brief rundown about what clients are and what it looks like now, because sometimes, well, Ethereum moves fast and we know that there's been a change with the merge and things are operating differently now. So I think most people probably know that that has occurred, but let's get into a little bit about what clients do. There are two different kinds of clients. And so why don't we just start with an explanation of how this works? I'm going to quickly screen share something that will show a visual of it, but does someone want to just jump in and start explaining what is a client? We're not talking about a person that you hired. This is something a little bit different than that. So what is it?
So I guess I'll take a stab at it first. A client in this context is the softwares that run the Ethereum network. So people that want to participate in the Ethereum network will need to run certain software. And in the case of Ethereum, you have to actually run two types of software.
You can keep going. I'm just showing the picture.
Got it. Okay. So with this diagram, we have the consensus clients, which consist of a validator client and a beacon node. So you'll see at the top here, beacon node. Below it is the execution client. And Hart can talk a little bit about that component. The beacon node is responsible for figuring out the state of the Ethereum blockchain. And so Ethereum runs off of proof of stake, and the beacon node will be responsible for anything proof of stake related, the validators, how does it do, all the algorithms to figure out which blocks should go into the chain and which blocks should be rejected, and propagating that information across all the other clients that everyone else runs. So maybe I'll turn it over to Hart to talk a little bit about the execution engine.
Sure. Yeah, I don't want to go too deep into detail because this is obviously a rabbit hole. But informally speaking, the execution engine processes the smart contracts. So you can think of it as sort of, handling the internal sort of data of the blockchain at a very high level. Last year, Ethereum made the decision to split these two parts of the client off. So now you have what is called consensus clients and execution clients. And that, I think, has been, a fantastic development for Ethereum in a number of different ways. And I guess we'll spend a lot more time talking about that today. So I don't want to get too deep into this. And I'll turn it over. Does anyone else want to jump in here?
I just want to add something for a bit summary of what you guys said. In the sense that the beacon node is more responsible for the networking side, getting everything on the top of the block. Execution, as Hart was saying, is a more smart contract, running the code, seeing if everyone agreed. Just want to summarize everything in one note. And it was before, as you were saying, before proof of work, execution client was also responsible for consensus as well. And now this separation, which we get into, actually added a lot more value than we thought before.
Yeah, and I think that when we start talking about something that's so complex, it's really hard to figure out how to explain it in a way that everyone can understand. It's just a universal difficulty to do this. So for those listening, I encourage you to continue paying attention, and it'll kind of circle back around. So if you don't understand everything at first, that's totally normal. Sometimes you have to know what's happening before and after to understand the middle, and it's impossible to get to the middle without doing that. So anyways, if we kind of do this to explain it, but that's normal, and stick around, and then the terms that we're using will come to make more sense and will kind of come into full picture. So if you're scratching your head right now, it's okay, and ask questions in the chat, and we're just going to keep plugging away until we feel like we really have a handle on how this works. So we did discuss that there's two different clients. There's consensus clients and execution clients. Within those, there's even a bunch of different options. So what I think we should start by doing is just discussing what does it look like to have different options. And maybe we want to explain also a little bit more about the differences between consensus and execution clients, and just focus on one a little bit and then the other. And so what do you think we should start with? Should we do consensus or execution first?
I can give it an intro and then give everyone the chance to talk about their specific modules. One of the reasons, first of all, these two would be a full Ethereum node. If you want to, we can run one or the other for any specific reasons, but as a normal user, if someone wants to do staking, these two together is a full Ethereum node. And that's one thing. So before we had just execution client, which Go Ethereum or Geth was one of the main ones that Ethereum Foundation also pushed to create it. There were other ones, Parity, then became Open Ethereum. There was other ones, but Go Ethereum was the main one. And we saw with some of the additional tools around it, it became a central point in the ecosystem. And one of the reasons that the separation also happened was to remove this central point and have different teams. And we know just to know, like Ethereum Foundation is not pushing for any of these like beacon chain clients. Like they're not touching it. So different teams are working. And one of the things I loved about this having multiple execution clients and multiple consensus clients was that in most of the coding circles, there's always this conversation that Rust is better than Go, like this is better than the other one. And this helped that if there are two smart people, that one is on Rust, one is like works on Go, they don't have to like fight each other. They can just work on the same protocol on different clients and kind of prove which one works better by actually making a better client. And that's one of the things I loved about the outcome that I was not seeing when this decision was made. So yeah, now we can go to maybe different clients of like what are the different beacon chain clients, what are different execution client. If, James, you want to start with consensus and then we go to execution, or however you like to.
Yeah, I guess one little note to sort of add in here, the softwares are sort of completely separated because the Ethereum blockchain never stopped when it switched consensus models. It used to be running on proof of work, and the execution client had the consensus mechanisms for proof of work before. And sort of while the Ethereum blockchain was moving, the second chain spun up, the beacon chain that the consensus client software runs. And last September, there was an event called the merge that basically tied these two softwares together and intertwined these two chains. So on the in this process of sort of switching over to the Ethereum proof of stake, this mechanism on consensus is through voting, right? And for it to be more resilient, it would be best to have clients written in different languages and different using different dependencies, but all in a sense using the same underlying protocol and same rules to the game, essentially. So in our case, the Prysm consensus client was written in Go, and prior to the merge, it used to be like the most popular client, which has its dangers. And so we're here talking about client diversity to talk about like why having so much majority usage may not be the best thing for the network as a whole. So before the merge happened, Prysm had something like 68%, 70% market share in staking, and there was a whole campaign to sort of reduce that number and make sure that other clients were represented, and that way, if there was a consensus bug, then the majority client, if they had the bug, wouldn't just like destroy the chain.
Yeah, first of all, every time we say the merge, I want to be like, the merge, jazz hands. So for anybody watching, the merge is like this huge thing for everybody. I'm guessing you're aware of that, but it was a pretty big deal. And one of the other things that you talked about, James, that I think we should touch on is this idea, and I think Shayan, you said it too, is that there are many different languages that are used. And this really goes along with this idea of Ethereum being decentralized and not having just one choice for things. And this is kind of the whole ecosystem, having choices, having options. And if we think about it as in like the languages that we speak and how our language can help define our culture, it does so much. Life would be really boring and centralized if everyone had the exact same languages. And it's similar when we're talking about the programming languages used for these consensus and execution clients. So that is my non-technical way of explaining it. Did anyone else have anything to follow up with what James just said?
Yeah, I'll jump on James's points as well, and your points. I really agree. You know, as we all know, sort of the core trait of blockchain is decentralization, right? That's the point. That's what we're after. And one thing to think about that I like to always bring up is you're only really as decentralized as your weakest link. So there are a number of different, ways that you can be centralized. There are tons of them. I have a whole slide deck on this, sort of asking people like, should you use blockchain? And if one of these, sort of wastes is centralized and you're sort of insisting on centralization in one spot, you have to be careful. But for something like running a blockchain, it really encompasses everything, right? If everyone's running the same software, if there's a bug in the software, it's a catastrophe, right? And that's what we're talking about today. It's if all of your blockchain nodes are running in the same cloud, that's really bad, right? That's centralization, and that can be a catastrophe, as some blockchains have found out, right? If you don't, and it even goes even further, like centralization of like standards and protocols, right? If you only have sort of one person writing your standards in, without a lot of transparency, that's not great either, right? You want like a big, diverse committee deciding your standards with proper academic review. So, I think this is a really deep conversation, and we could easily spend, we could have a full week workshop on all of the different ways that we need to ensure decentralization for Ethereum and really any blockchain, any public blockchain.
Let's do it. Starting now, we're going to do a 138-hour marathon. Thanks for joining us. Just kidding.
I actually have a question for James. But Hart, I think you're halfway through your point. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I have a question for James, which is like you mentioned that Prysm was like the majority client around the time of the merge, and because of that, there were some risks there. And in fact, everyone's going, stop using Prysm, stop using Prysm. How does that feel for you? Because like normally as a software developer, you're like maximum market share, right? So it's an interesting thing where you actually have to make the best software you can, but at the same time, you've got these overriding concerns about if you're too dominant, then it's actually bad for the network as a whole.
Yeah. So in terms of that, you can take a look at, there's a Medium post by our co-founder, Raul Jordan, on Prysm's position in terms of representing itself. Obviously, we're not going to make inferior software, but there were a lot of different aspects we could support other clients to maybe move in a direction where it could support certain features that we had at the time that maybe they didn't have, and sort of balance everything out. So of course, very focused on making our product as good as possible, but maybe reducing a little bit on the marketing side of things, and also working on sort of community efforts. And one of the things that came out of this was around the key manager APIs. So Prysm at the time was the only consensus client that could provide a UI. And if you could buy something like a dApp node or an Avado pre-built Ethereum node, which is basically like a mini computer that would run the software already, users of that system did not have access to the terminal, which is like the command line interface to actually run the software. And so for Prysm, we actually provided a little web UI that would allow users to upload their validator key stores and sort of manage their validators through some kind of GUI instead of everything through command line. And if you're a non-technical user, that's probably the best approach instead of dealing with all of these different commands, all these different flags. And Prysm was the only one that sort of provided that because the validator client had an API. And the Key Manager API initiative sort of made a standard set of APIs across all of the consensus clients so that others could build UIs in front of their validator client to manage their validator clients without using the CLIs, as an example.
So what you're talking about is this idea of shared responsibility, that you feel responsible to make sure that others can share in this as well, that it's not because it's the best thing for the network. Shayan, go ahead.
No, I just want to add, like, that's a really interesting point. I didn't know about this story, but like early Bitcoin wallets, early Ethereum wallets, they all didn't have this kind of standard for a lot of the key management. And that's why, like, still, like, if you have a really old Bitcoin wallet, the Bitcoin exists, you have the key, but you might not be able to access it because of just the format, the standard they use. And it's interesting because later on, I was using the Web3 signer, which is like the third, like a key management outside the node. And I think Lighthouse and Prysm were the only ones, or they didn't have the same support. So we couldn't move from one node to the other because of the way they were, like, the arguments work. And I think later on it was solved by adding some other arguments, but that was like an interesting point that I felt while implementing some of the infrastructure.
Yeah, that's definitely another case where Prysm for its internal APIs uses gRPC instead of REST. And so all the other clients have eventually moved to REST based, and it took us a little bit longer to move towards that. But we had our own remote signer software, and that was gRPC based. And we eventually adopted Web3 Signer, and now Web3 Signer is used across all of the consensus clients. It's a consensus product, but we're in the discussions right now of open sourcing that interface. Right now, it's part of the consensus GitHub repo, but that interface has been used for other developers who have developed their own implementation of Web3 Signer. And so we think it's a good idea to now open source that interface for everybody. So we're in discussions for that.
And just want to add something. Apparently, so we're one hop away in that conversation, because, like, there's a software called Secure Signer, which I was talking, and they're trying to do this. So maybe we're in the same circles, but we haven't talked directly.
The small yet big world.
Yeah, and if you need an open source home, come talk to us.
Let's hear about it.
Oh, well, I guess that's just what we do, right? We're, I work for the Linux Foundation. We host open source development projects. Everything from the Linux kernel to Kubernetes, to software that a lot of cars run, really all over the place. So I know that's not the topic of the conversation today, but that's my job is open source software and open source development.
Well, it's I think, important fact for people to know that there are resources out there that are available that they can get for free.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, one of the coolest things I think about Besu is it is totally open development, right? Anyone can join, anyone can contribute. It's a completely open project. The only thing that is not fully public is the security list, right, for obvious reasons. But yeah, you can join, anyone can contribute, anyone can become a maintainer. Yeah, it's like working on the Linux kernel or Kubernetes or something like that. So I'm a big proponent of open development, and I hope it sort of takes off more in the Ethereum space.
So there's a key part of what you mentioned around security, and maybe that'll help us refocus back on client diversity. One of the drawbacks of decentralization is we can't update people's software, right? Like, we can't remotely update people's software. And that becomes a potential vulnerability area, right? Because like maybe there's an exploit on some dependency that our specific programming language uses. And we need everybody to go update that immediately. Otherwise, that would wreck the system. So that's another point on like why would it be bad for a single consensus client to have such a large majority of the network? Because if some kind of vulnerability was found in the libraries that it was using, then it could break the system, even if the software that the programmers wrote for that client was good.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go plug another Linux Foundation project here called the OpenSSF, which is the Open Source Security Foundation. And it is focused on exactly these kind of problems with, software dependencies, going furthermore into diversity, right? If you have a bunch of clients, but they all are dependent on one similar package, and there's a bug in that package that causes a massive bug, that's a centralization vector, right? That's a potential big problem. And I'm assuming that's what you were alluding to.
Right, yeah. And I'll go a little bit further and talk about an incident that actually happened end of 2021. The Log4j issue, where it's a very popular logging library. It's almost standard, but there was a very big exploit found with that library. And I'm not exactly sure which clients were affected and to what extent those clients were affected. But I know that Prysm doesn't use didn't use Log4j, but if we used some other thing that had a exploit to it, then it would have been really bad.
Yeah, I mean, the Log4j was exactly an example of building castles on air and this software bill of materials stuff. It was used in all kinds of software that had, it needed extremely high levels of security. But, if you looked at who was maintaining it, it was just an extremely lightweight, small team. They didn't have any security professionals really on the team. So it was just sort of a case of, of just software being used far, far more than originally intended. I believe there's some other examples. I want to say it was like Node.js, where someone wrote a color program or something and then took it away, and it ended up like breaking half the programs.
I think it happened with NPM as well, right?
Yeah, the NPM one with the string. It's like a string parser that was used by everybody.
Yeah, and these things are real issues, and I guess there isn't like a formal like SBOM thing for Ethereum clients, but that's probably where we should be going in the future, right? Is we should have everybody double check and make sure that no one is, or not too many people are relying on the same critical packages.
So how do we do that? Anyone have thoughts?
Well, I'll give the short answer is this is what this Open Source Security Foundation is working on. That's the very short answer. The long answer is it's not easy. It takes a lot of time, and it's it's going to be a little bit difficult, but it's really important, particularly for. Go ahead. Sorry.
I feel like we're also recently they've been discussing it in terms of self-destruct as well, right? Like even the approaches with self-destruct, they are having a lot of the similar situations where which contracts will break if we implement self-destruct, removing self-destruct in a certain way. And I think it's a very similar kind of case as well.
I mean, the first key thing is like the client software should be open source, because otherwise like we wouldn't be able to detect what kind of dependency it's using, and how the code is written that could produce whatever vulnerability it is.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if you're not using open source software in blockchain, I mean, I don't even know what to say at this point.
Like, why are you
You're
here
doing the wrong
if you're not
thing.
using it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just want to
exactly.
bring back the conversation to the diversity, which we touched on an interesting point. Like, so we were talking about diversity in the clients, and this culture kind of becoming like more dominant as like in a secure, like the signer software that okay, key management. Also, there is a value in diversifying that, because similar concept can go there. If that fails, it trickles down there, and we can talk about diversity a bit more. But I feel like there are some subjects that I want to touch on, and we can describe some of the issues that there are. Like, one of the things that I'm excited about, but at the same time, I'm afraid how complex that might be, is DVT or distributed validator technology, or the fact that you have these two clients as a full node, you have this signer, but what if you have multiple one of these doing the job of one? There's arguments for it, which is really good. Like, you won't ever lose the key. Like, if you lose one key, you still have 2/3 or some other rest. It depends on your threshold. But then if your two nodes are down, if you're 2 out of 5, the others are working. But the complexity of that, I want to know, like, you guys, like, opinion on this. If there's a better way of describing this also, like, please go ahead. And it's an interesting topic overall for me.
Well, this is just a general application of multi-party computation and threshold cryptography, right? I mean, this is, yeah, it's, I mean, I think this is, as a community, this is, we're going to have to embrace this stuff, right? For everything from wallets to validators. I do also share your worry that there will be centralization in cryptographic implementations.
To be honest, like, yeah, go ahead. Like, I just want to add something. My concern is not the centralization part, is more like, in the last 2 years, I worked with a lot of like regulatories on understanding how key management works, what's the best secure way, like, especially doing audits, like, what's the best way of custodian and others. And as soon as someone mentioned SSV or DVT, I would love to jump on it, but I was like, I don't even know where to begin. Like, multi-sig is still like one layer deep, too deep. And if you want to do that complex, how would you even communicate with someone that is like not deep into this space?
Yeah. Running Ethereum nodes is sort of becoming its own ecosystem of different softwares intertwined with each other. It's like Lego pieces. It's like you take this software, then you combine it with this one, but like, that's where the challenge is, and we'll need everybody's help to sort of see if these Lego pieces are essentially connecting correctly. So with DVT, this middleware software basically sits between your execution client and your consensus client, or actually it's between the validator client and the beacon node. So it sits there, and there's like this whole stack of things that's like, these API requests, it must assume that some of those things are valid and not malicious. So communications between the beacon node and the execution node, there are certain things that the beacon node will rely on the execution node to validate, and we'll have to assume that, like, oh, this is valid. But as you introduce more of these middlewares, we have to be very careful on what assumptions are being made. But there's pros and cons, right? Like, it allows this ecosystem to sort of grow and essentially have all these, they're not exactly microservices, but it's all these services connected to each other, and sort of allows the outer community to contribute in those ways.
I was just wondering if we could take a short step back and actually like kind of define what DVT is, so that we don't throw an acronym out there that we talk about and then we want to give people kind of like a little overview of what it is.
And then people come up with their own words that are for the acronym, and it gets kind of wild and crazy. Yes, please explain and get into it a little bit. I think you were going to screen share something about it, Dustin. Were you? Is that?
I would like someone else to explain it, but the reason that I had a screen share for it was that in the meetup that I hosted last week, one of the guests was Paul Salisbury from Everlasting, and he said that his OBOL cluster, which is one of the DVT providers, their OBOL cluster stayed up through the entire finality saga. So like I thought that was an interesting insight about how he thinks that DVT might have contributed to sufficient resiliency during that episode.
So yeah, I can try. Like, so
I was going to say, I can tell you what
DVT
the acronym is, but yes, I'm handing it off,
okay.
Shayan, by all means.
So it's basically like distributed validator technology, or we also have like SSV, which is what was it? SSV? Like let me just see, SSV, secret sharing validation, like something like that. I think so. It's on the web, anything. So and the whole idea is like you have like, let's say you have one client, beacon chain, and you have like one key, that this key is on your beacon validator, is doing the signing, sending the transaction, and is your identity in the network. So both these technologies, which OBOL network is one of the one, there's a few others. And there is a lot more actually coming soon, because I know there are projects that are working on this idea, is to separate this one key to more, and say, let's say similar to multisig. As the multi-signature, you basically say 2 out of these 3 keys must sign for this transaction to be valid. So you're coming down to the validator network, you can have 5 nodes running, say 2 out of 3 nodes must sign, and they sign, aggregate the signatures, and send it to a network as if it's one key, one signature. So the network doesn't need to know the back setup, like how it was. So it's a similar thing. There is like a few good things. Like the cons is like you need to run 5 nodes instead of like 1 node. You can optimize it, but still, like that's the concept. But the good part about it is, if for any reason, like the idea is like you lose 5 different regions in the world, 5 different clients. So if anything goes wrong for 2 of the clients, 2 of the regions in the world, you still have like the other ones running. So as long as you have at least 2 of these nodes running, you can validate, you're online, you would not lose rewards or lose the network validation. That's the concept of like the whole DVT. And yeah, so is there anything else I can explain here? I would.
So it feels like it also kind of provides some element of like geographic diversity as well, where you could have like multiple, you have multiple validators in different parts of the world, so that, if let's say Amazon West goes down or whatever, you still have a validator that's on a different network slice.
Yeah, exactly. And also for the key management as well. So it's like a concern for a lot of nodes are like you're having a hot wallet. Even though the withdrawal address is set before, and then no one can steal the money, but still they can cause you to slash or some other ways. So in this case, if if one of your validators gets compromised and the key is leaked, you're still okay. Like you don't have to worry. Yeah. So the resilience, security, and also like you can be a diverse actor of this network. You're not just choosing 2 clients. But to Dustin's point, also, we've seen that people use multi-sigs and multi-keys and run all the keys on the same machine. So hopefully that's not going to be the case.
Yeah. One other aspect of this, I guess, is the cost of the key, right? Hopefully this will reduce the participation cost to participate in Ethereum proof of stake. To be a validator, you have to stake 32 ETH. And it's not a small sum of money, but it's by design. It needs to be some amount of money that could have financial loss so that you're incentivized to participate as a good actor. On the other hand, as maybe the price will go up in the future or anything like that, it becomes a bigger and bigger risk to hold on to just like that one thing, and it'll be more and more difficult for people to participate as validators. So part of this is maybe you can stake a smaller amount, but still run the software to help the network.
Yeah, and there are some projects that are trying to do that. Like one, just disclaimer, I'm advising this project, but it's called Puffer. But they're trying to do something of like right now, Rocket Pool has like 8 ETH minimum, but you lend everything from the protocol. Puffer trying to do like 2 ETH using Intel SGX and like kind of like trusted execution, but like using this distributed validator technology to have a way. Like it's really early on, but I feel like they're on the right path to get to something interesting.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about DVT. Should we talk about other challenges right now that exist that we should be concerned about? Are there any that we want to discuss that we've missed?
Challenges in client diversity?
Yes.
Yeah, I can sort of lead on that. So the clients all run off of a protocol spec. And so essentially the game theory pieces of it to reach consensus and all of those things are discussed very openly, and all of those pieces have to work the same across all of the different clients in order to reach agreement and work correctly. But there are very different engineering details in all this, and not all clients are the same in its user experience, in its support for items. For example, Prysm, one of the things that we're trying to work on is supporting Alpine for new Docker images, and that's been on our to-do list for quite a while. But not all clients support all operating systems, whether it's Dockerized images or running on your computer. If I wanted to run certain clients on my Mac with the M1 chip, I wouldn't be able to do it for certain clients. And these factors all contribute to people's choice in the specific client. If they want to only run their client on Windows, like maybe that limits their choices. If one client is too complex to run, maybe that will also limit some choices. So maybe I'll pass it to Hart for other opinions.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you said it really well. There are a number of, I like to think of Ethereum and the Ethereum Foundation really as a standards organization, right? At a very high level, they set the standard for Ethereum, and then it's off to all of these other people to sort of implement the standard, and create the software. But what the standard doesn't specify, you can do a lot of different things. Like, for instance, Besu has a bonsai trie data storage feature, right? Which I don't know if you all are familiar with, but it's essentially a trade-off that lets you, generally speaking, store a little bit less data, and it gives you faster lookups of things that happened more recently in the blockchain at the expense of sort of, more expensive, older lookups, which is like a trade-off that team likes. But other teams, haven't done that. They might not agree it's a good trade-off. So there are lots of things that are, done differently between different blockchains. And there are lots of implementation and compatibility challenges. And as a number of you all have alluded, the difficulty of running a node is a challenge for essentially, I think, all clients at this point, right? My grandmother is not going to be able to go spin up her own Ethereum validator or Ethereum node at this point. And, maybe it will never get to the point where that's acceptable. But, ideally it would be easier than it is today.
Yeah, we're still at the grandma using MetaMask challenge. I feel like we still have a long way to go to like running validators. I just want to add like a few more challenges from someone that is not working on any of these clients, but like basically running them and playing around with them. One of the early ones I faced was switching from one client to the other because of like basically what you guys were mentioning. As the spec is known how to interact with the protocol, but not inside there, and how you store the files and how you index the blockchain. So like I wanted to like switch from one actually with Prysm to Lighthouse or like to I think Lodestar or something. Yeah. And the problem was I needed another 2 terabytes of hard drive, another download of 2 terabytes hard drive to get that downloaded and be able to switch. And which is like not small requirement in that sense. I already got like an email from my ISP that like something is downloading 4 terabytes a month on your hard drive in your home, which is a lot of data. And another one, which I feel like it's more the challenge you guys are facing, also the testing. Like you are testing so many clients that if one client is added, like is exponentially more. Oh yeah, actually I've seen this. This is pretty cool. Exponentially more hard to test because you need to test all combinations with other ones. So those are the ones that I've also felt running these nodes.
You walk us through that, Dustin, what you're showing with the client distribution. And I think what you were showing before is touched on what Shayan was talking about how to switch clients as well.
Yeah, they're writing the guidelines. Yeah.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to share this site because it was related to what you're saying, which is like tutorials about switching clients. So clientdiversity.org is a great resource for this. What they do is that it's diversify now. That's the call to action, right? And this is how you diversify now. You look at what the client distribution is, so you can target that. I want to use a minority client. It gives you an idea of like, are you contributing to a centralization issue by going with a majority client, or do you want to support a minority client? And then, if you do have a specific client that you're currently using, they also tell you how you can switch from one client to another. So, for example, if you're currently using Teku and you want to switch to Lighthouse, for example, then you would search for guides, and then it gives you all the guides that are available. This is a reading guide. This is a YouTube guide. So this is.
You would want to do the reverse.
Yeah, of course. Yes. Yeah, but basically, this is one of the key resources for like if you want to run a node, and then if you want to help with client diversity.
Do you guys think, like, over time, would you say client diversity is getting better? Do you feel confident that it's going to increase? And Hart, maybe you want to start with this because I think Besu has been increasing, correct, in terms of how many people are using it. And so do you want to talk a little bit about, are we optimistic about this? What are your concerns?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because we don't always know why it increases. Particularly, it's particularly for something, that's totally open, right? People don't have to tell us when or why they switch. We have seen Besu get a lot of attention for people running permissioned Besu networks or L2s, and that may play some into it that, all of these like central banks are announcing they're going to work with Besu. So, maybe people see that as a vote of confidence. There's always some worry that sort of, there's going to be a pile-on effect where if something is considered to be the best client, then, people are selfishly just going to use that and say like, well, why would I use anything but the best client? And that sort of, focuses and concentrates all of the attention on a single client. So I think there is kind of, there are some equilibrium forces that do make client diversity challenging. And then we have to sort of work hard to try to counteract that, potential push to a single client. But yeah, as far as why Besu is becoming more popular, I think that the development, the maintainers are doing a good job, but I can't give you a specific reason.
Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting that graphic that you showed, Dustin, in that you could see that Geth has it's in red. So while somebody might look at a different graphic and think, oh, look at it, look at how great they're doing, they're this majority, we're saying that's not great. There needs to be more diversity. Having 64% using Geth is problematic. Did we explain why? I think we gave a few concerns about it. Was there anything that we didn't cover about why this is problematic? Because obviously one of our goals for this live stream is that we want people to recognize how important this diversity is, and that if you know someone who's running a node, or you are, these are things to think about to make sure that you're doing the right thing for the community, I would say.
Yeah, so I just want to add, so exactly to your point, I love this measurement because it goes almost against any business measurements, or even like a lot of like successful company measurements. As like, if you have more users, we might be worry more rather than, oh, we succeeded. And one of the reasons the Geth is high, like in my opinion, is like, so it was one of the only acquisition clients that the Ethereum Foundation was like funding and working with, as like, here you go, there's a first. But I feel like the MEV part, the MEV boost that was part of the Geth, only kind of pushed that people going to the Geth. I don't want to get into that right now, because I think we had a session about MEV before. But this way of measuring this to me is like an innovation by itself, and I want to read books on this later on, or better Netflix documentaries if that's like easier to me. But it's really like one of the things that actually results in that is people are seeing the last week finality issue, or overall the way the slashing system works is like, if we are more than 33% of the network and our client is something's wrong with it, then we would get slashed really hard, and the whole network would be like much slower. And that's kind of like a good way of saying, if you're with the popular kids, you might get slashed. So like, make sure you're like diverse enough. And yeah, I want to see more of like others' opinion on this, but I love the way this measurement came to be. And I've never seen anything before like this. As like, imagine with iPhone and Android, we had the same thing, we would have a different market for sure. So anyone wants to add something?
I think I'm pretty hopeful on client diversity, but the client diversity topic is something more complex than just a number in terms of how many people are running the software. There's many more reasons behind why it's happening, and it's important to support those minority clients in many other ways besides just running it. Maybe, support adding additional features. I don't want to cover it too much, but Lighthouse is the only consensus client right now that MEV Boost uses for its relays, and that is a big problem in the ecosystem. We should definitely have more support there. Prysm can run it with certain patches, but not on any of the official releases right now. But like that's just one example of like support. And again, in terms of those operating systems, we don't want to like forget people on certain operating systems, but certain clients just can't run it on certain operating systems and certain Docker image types. So it's important to look at client diversity, but there's definitely like a reason. There's a more complex reason behind it. And another aspect to look at it is the Ethereum network and its protocol hasn't ossified yet. Every couple months or years, there will be upgrades to the system until full ossification. And in the process of researching how to do these upgrades, there's always a couple leaders, and it tends to be a Geth on the execution client side because the Ethereum researchers are used to this client and they will do the proof of concepts in it. It's battle tested. That's where you'll get the sort of results. And if other clients are sort of just following suit, that's not enough. It needs to be in a bit more competition for it to be evened out.
Yeah, and another way of support, I'm saying this because I have to write one, is like write-ups on how to run nodes, how to run the best way of the stack to use. I was running a node on my home computer in Toronto, and I think 5 days before it was activated, it went down, and I was just glad that I had a SSH client running and it was proxied, so I could, from the chains in Europe, I was just SSHing, trying to fix it. And I learned so much on like what to do and what not to do and how not over-engineer things, because there's no reason for that. Especially I want to like be a bit greedy and use 80% of all the resources in there. I was like, I don't want to just use 30% of the CPU. But I learned so much, and I need to write this because I know there's going to be a lot more people facing the same issues. Basically, this is a call to action for myself, as like this week I'm going to sit and write this before forgetting that. But I see that in a lot of people on Twitter, on ETHStaker Discord, that a lot of people go through the same issue again and again and again, but we don't have a proper way of like searchable index troubleshooting. So that would be a really good support for all these nodes and overall the ecosystem.
So we've got 2 minutes left. So I have a very quick question. Do you think that eventually it's going to become more simple for people who aren't super technical or technical at all to be able to do this on their own, so that we can increase client diversity and just the number of people running these nodes? Is that something that's coming, or do you think we've got a long way to go?
Yes.
Excited. Thumbs down.
I think this could be its own talk. I think this is an area of a lot of contention. I've heard the opposite take, that running an Ethereum client is sort of like flying a plane. Do we want everyone to be able to fly planes easily? You need some level of training to do the task. And until Ethereum has more ossification, there might be things asked of validators that go beyond the scope of their current non-technical understanding.
Yeah, like that was a really good point, because I feel like with DAppNode, with Ethereum, there's a lot of these tools that are like ETHWizard are making it so easy to run it, but the troubleshooting is actually like the problem. That is, you actually need to know a lot of knowledge on how the Linux machine works, what the hardware is, what could go wrong. And I faced that a few times with friends that ran the node, and it was like, this is so easy. Why did you tell us like 2 years earlier? First of all, those software didn't exist 2 years earlier, but now I just hope they don't have to troubleshoot, because I know my phone would be like ringing then.
So basically, people like me should butt out. Noted. And we'll wait to see what we can do later, I guess. And this has been super enlightening. I really appreciate you all taking the time to be here today to talk about this. It's a very important issue, obviously, we all know. And any closing remarks anyone wanted to say, either Hart about Besu or James about Prysm, or Shayan or Dustin, before we say goodbye?
The software is open source, so if you have a complaint with it, you should definitely help us out. Open issues, open PRs. Well, we need to work together to make this software great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Besu is also completely open, and full open development. If you contribute enough, you can even become a maintainer. So yeah, please feel free to dive in. We encourage people to lurk. We encourage people to ask questions. Just because you're not yet an expert doesn't mean you shouldn't try to get involved.
Yep, and don't
Yep.
use the most popular client just because it's the most popular client. Popular kids aren't always the ones that you should be hanging out with all the time. So let's think about it that way. No
I
one
just
asked
want
if
to
I
add
was-
something, Jessica, one thing before. I just want to say, like, for especially like you were saying, the not super techies that want to know more. One of the things I've faced is because of the pace of everything, there's a lot of documentations that are outdated, or there are things that are wrong. They're just slightly wrong, or actually you have to like link to the new ones. And there are so many documentation. You click on a link and it says 404 link, so you have to like fix this. And it's easy to, because they're all still open source, and it would be a perfect place to find those and fill in those gaps and basically fix those documentations. Because like whoever fixed that saves hours and days of other developers to solve those issues.
Absolutely. In our open source contributing guides, we often recommend documentation as one of the first places to get involved if you want to stick your feet in. So I totally agree with that.
And this kind of goes back to what we were saying before about shared responsibility and working together to make the Ethereum ecosystem safer and more diverse. So with that, thank you all so much for joining today. I really appreciate it. I feel like I've learned a lot that I didn't know, and it was just great getting your perspectives and hearing from you, Hart, about Besu and what's going on at Hyperledger Foundation and Linux, and same with you, James, about what's going on with Prysm and OffChain Labs. So thank you guys for joining, and hope we get to hang out again on one of these live streams. So thanks for sharing your brains with us, and take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.